people who have never taken hallucinogenic drugs but have some mild interest in it, or just in the course of generally educating yourself about reality, I think people who have never taken psychedelics think that it's sort of like dreaming while you're awake, or geometric patterns, colors. They always say, the colors, malarkey, the colors, forget the colors. It is not like that. Psychedelic experiences at effective doses, not piddling doses, effective doses, are visionary scenarios. They are three-dimensional unfoldments of information that is extraordinarily complex, architectonically connected, and ordered. That's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what is unique to psilocybin. What is unique to psilocybin is that overlaid over what I just described is, big surprise, a voice. A voice. Everybody knows this who has to do with this stuff. Gordon Wasson, Richard Schultes, Albert Hoffman. The giants know that this stuff is animate. This is not a drug. It's something which is disguising itself as a drug in order not to spread alarm. There is a voice which speaks to you in the language of your homeland, whether that be Mazatecan or English. And the voice surprises you. In other words, you cannot anticipate it. Now, of course, at this point, though I don't imagine many of them have forced their way in here, the psychological school will come forward and say, well, it's a voice typical of mental aberration, symptom 1 of schizophrenia, a voice. Yes, we are not naive. We went to the same schools you did.
Even in those early mushroom experiences at La Chorrera, there was an aura of the animate and the strange that focused in the idea that the mushroom was somehow more than a plant hallucinogen, or even a shamanic ally of the classical sort, that it was in fact a kind of intelligent entity, not of Earth, alien, and able to present itself during the trance as a presence in the inward-turned perceptions of its beholder. In the days following our lives, the lives of my brother and myself underwent a tremendous and bizarre transformation. It was not until Jacques Vallée had written of the absurd element that is invariably a part of the situation in which contact with a UFO occurs that I found the courage to again examine the events at La Chorrera, to try to fit them into some general pattern. I have told various parts of our story over the years, never revealing the entire incredible structure to any one listener, because of what I knew it seemed to imply about our mental condition during the time of the experience. Any story of UFO contact is going to be incredible enough by itself, but central to our story are the hallucinogenic drugs that we had been experimenting with. The very fact that we were involved with such drugs as a method of triggering UFO contacts would make any story we might eventually have to tell seem highly dubious to anyone not sympathetic to the use of hallucinogens. There were other difficulties with telling this story. The events at La Chorrera generated a great deal of controversy and subsequent bitterness among the participants because several ideas of what was taking place were represented, each basing itself on data unavailable or deemed ipso facto irrelevant by the competing interpretations. We were poorly prepared for the events that overwhelmed us. We began as naive observers of something, we knew not what, and because our involvement with this phenomenon went on for many days, we were able to observe many aspects of it, and I was able to satisfy myself that generally the method of approach which is told of here is effective for triggering whatever it is that we call the UFO contact experience. It may also be dangerous. Back at the Knoll house, we kindled a fire and boiled rice for a light supper. Rain was falling intermittently. After dinner we smoked and waited long, thinking that Vanessa and Dave might visit. Finally it began to drizzle a bit harder, and so we drew ourselves forward and each ate a large pile of mushrooms. The onset of the stropharia was rapid and the hallucinations very vivid. But after an hour or so, the experience did not seem to be particularly different from the earlier trips, in spite of the larger dose. We had come out of our reveries and were conversing softly about our reactions. Dennis complained that he felt blocked from a deep connection by concern for our father in Colorado, whether or not our last messages to him before setting off down the Rio Putumayo had reached him before he went on his vacation. Dennis seemed melancholy, a state of homesickness in combination with a hallucinogen, I supposed. I tried to reassure him, and we talked softly in the darkness for several minutes. He said that his trip consisted of many things, a suffusing inner heat and a strange audial buzzing that gave him, so he said, insight into audial and linguistic phenomena that I had experienced on DMT and described to him before. I asked him to imitate the sounds that he was hearing, but he seemed to think it not possible. While we talked, the drizzle had lifted somewhat, and we could faintly hear the sound of a transistor radio being carried by someone who had chosen the let-up in the storm to make their way up the hill on a small path that passed a few feet from our hut. Our conversation stopped, and we listened as the small radio sound drew near and then began to fade. At that moment, Dennis gave forth with a very machine-like, loud, dry buzz. His body became stiff in the few seconds in which this occurred. After a moment's silence, he broke into a frightened series of excited questions.
What happened?
What happened? And, most memorably, I don't want to become a giant insect. He was very disturbed by what had happened, and Ev and I both talked to him and attempted to calm him. It was obvious that what to us had seemed only a strange sound had had far different effects on the person who made it. I understood his predicament because it was familiar to me from DMT experiences where a kind of glossolalia of thought that seemed to me the very embodiment of meaning seemed mere gibberish when verbalized and heard by other people. Dennis spoke of tremendous energy in the sound and said that he had felt it like a physical force of some kind. We discussed it for several minutes, and finally Dennis decided that he wished to attempt the effect again. This he did, but for a much shorter time. He again reported that the subjective experience was of great energy being unleashed. He said that he felt as though he might leave the ground if he directed his voice downward. We discussed the effect in terms of sound possibly having a synergistic effect on metabolizing drugs. Dennis vowed that from the inside it felt like the acquisition of a shamanic power of some sort. He began pacing around and wishing that Vanessa would appear out of the gloom with her skepticism, which he felt would crumble when confronted with his testimony of the reality of a strange effect. I told him that she would only think of it as a strange sound in combination with a drug she was growing uncertain of. At one point he became so excited that we all three left the hut and stood looking out into the pitch darkness. Dennis was contemplating going immediately to find Vanessa and Dave to discuss with them what had happened. Finally, a bewildered Ev and I convinced him to return to the hut and leave it all for the morning. Once back in the hut, there was more talk and attempts to figure out what was going on. I felt Dennis' amazement was perfectly reasonable. My own encounter with the audial and linguistic powers of the tryptamine drugs had been what had originally sent me looking into hallucinogens and their place in nature. It is an incredible experience to see all that you believe about reality changed around by these compounds. It is edifying, and excitement is a reasonable reaction. Throughout the making of breakfast, the events of the last evening were rediscussed and dissected.
The Ness and Dave were unmoved by Dennis's excited assertion that some extremely peculiar energy field had been tapped into and verified. At the end of breakfast, I suggested to Dennis that rather than arguing with people about the nature of the experience, he should go off by himself and write down all that he thought about the strange sound that he had made. He accepted this idea and made his way back up the hill to the Knoll house to be alone. And there he wrote,
28 February 1971. I approach these pages with a peculiar sense of urgency, as a man might who had confronted an inexplicable phenomenon, as some impossible creation of dreams or unaccountable natural principle. The task facing such a man would be a very subtle one, that is, to describe the phenomenon as accurately as possible. My task is compounded by the fact that the phenomenon I must try to describe has itself to do with the very tools of description, i.e. language. This rather peculiar statement will begin to make more sense as we explore the concept more fully. Before going further, something tells me it is necessary to consider who I am. 24 hours ago, I thought I knew. Now, this has become the most perplexing question I have ever been confronted with. The questions leading from it will provide the answers that will allow us to understand and use the phenomenon which is so difficult to describe. This may be the last characters of crude language that I will ever apply to the description of anything, since the phenomenon begins at the edge of language where the concept-forming faculty gropes but finds no words. I must be careful to avoid not distinguishing between mere language, symbol, metaphor, and the reality I'm attempting to apply it to. Since any phenomenon is, to a point, describable in empirical terms, so too with this one. It has to do with controlling one's body chemistry in such a way as to produce very specific vocal and audio phenomena. The state becomes possible when highly biodynamic vegetable alkaloids, specifically tryptamines and MAO inhibitors, are introduced into the body under very carefully regulated parameters. This phenomenon is apparently possible in the presence of tryptamines alone, though MAO inhibition definitely helps to trigger it by facilitating tryptamine absorption. The phenomenon has now been triggered by two people within our immediate group. Terence has been experimenting with vocal phenomena under the influence of DMT for some years now. Until last night, when I triggered and experienced the sound wave for a few brief seconds under the influence of 19 Stropharia mushrooms, Terence was the only person I knew who claimed ability to perform this sound. But last night, after ingesting the mushrooms, we lay waiting in our hammocks. The heavy, poisoned feeling that commonly passes briefly over the limbs at the beginning of the Stropharia visions had by this time passed completely. It had given way, in me at least, to a warm suffusion of contentment and good feeling that actually seemed to burn away somewhere inside of me. Such feelings I have had before, both on mushrooms and just after DMT flashes. Then we began to discuss people far away and how we might attempt to contact them fourth-dimensionally. Not such a strange rap for us. But it was definitely at some point in time near to that conversation that I first heard the sound. Immeasurably distant and faint, in the region between the ears, not outside, but definitely, incredibly there, perfectly distinct on the absolute edge of audio perception. A sound almost like a signal or very, very faint transmissions of radio buzzing from somewhere. Something like tingling chimes at first, but gradually becoming amplified into a snapping, popping, gurgling, crackling electrical sound. I try to imitate these noises with my vocal cords, just experimenting with a kind of humming, buzzing vocal sound made deep in the throat. Suddenly it was as if the sound of my voice locked into each other, and the sound was my voice, but coming out of me in such a way that no human voice could possibly distort itself the way mine was doing. The sound was suddenly much intensified in energy and was like the sound of a giant.
This mood of calm resignation was something new to me, perhaps enhanced by the mushroom, but developed during the month in Colombia preceding our trek into the jungle. As I walked, I looked for a place to sit down. Dennis had offered me his journal entry for that day to read. 1 March 1971.
1
Last
March,
night I
71.
again triggered the phenomenon
Last
after
night,
having
I
eaten one
again triggered
mushroom
the
and
phenomenon
smoking
after
grass.
having eaten one
It
mushroom
was almost
and smoking
identical to the
grass.
first
It
experience.
was almost identical
a
to the
lifting,
first
pulsing
experience.
wave of
A
vocal
lifting,
buzzing,
pulsing wave of
growing
vocal
loud very
buzzings,
quickly,
growing
and picking
loud
up
very
shock
quickly and
energy
picking
as
up
it did
shock
so.
energy as it did
Though I
so.
could have prolonged the
Though I
sound
could have
beyond
prolonged
a
the sound beyond a brief burst, I did not because of the energy. I am certain that soon it will become possible to trigger the sound completely without tryptamines or other drugs. It is becoming easier to plug in on each time, and I feel now that it is accessible at any time. It is clearly a learned activity that tryptamines can initiate and trigger, but it can happen without tryptamines once it is understood and mastered. We have thus far been able to establish the existence of peculiar vocal phenomena in 2 individuals subject to similar experimental controls. We must now attempt to understand what it is that the phenomenon could be. We must perform experiments with the sound and from our results develop theories to understand the processes at work. Terence has experimented with these sounds far more than anyone else, and I am the only other one that I know of, and he has discovered some interesting things. The DMT-initiated state, which allows prolonged bursts of this vocal energy, he describes as being one of seeing the levels of sound become more dense as they finally materialize into small, gnome-like, machine-like creatures made of a material like obsidian froth, which pours from the body, mouth, and sex organs as long as the sound continues. It is effervescent, phosphorescent, and indescribable. Here is where the linguistic metaphors become useless, for what the material actually is superlinguistic matter. It is a language, but not made of words, a language which becomes the thing it describes. It is a more perfect archetypal logos. We are convinced that through experimentation with these vocal phenomena, with and without the aid of drugs, it will be possible to understand and use translinguistic matter to accomplish any reality. For to say anything in this voice is to cause that thing to happen. Such a rash statement would be outlandish if it were not for our long and tedious speculations on the matter. Our studies in the chemistry of mind, the metabolism of tryptamine, the nature of thought, of consciousness, history, magic, shamanism, quantum and relativistic physics, metamorphosis in insects, alchemical processes, etc., together with the intuitive understanding of acausal events that we are deriving from the stropharia, allows us to venture a not entirely wild guess as to what this sound which takes form may be. Hallucinogens, by affecting the neural matrix, can produce changes in consciousness in the temporal dimension. Clearly, consciousness can work changes in 3 dimensions as well. On tryptamines, it is possible, under special conditions, to hear and vocalize a sound that turns through a higher dimensional manifold and condenses as translinguistic matter. That is, matter reduplicated upon itself through time, much as a hologram is reduplicated through space. The substance whose appearance the sounds initiate is tryptamine metabolized by mind through a higher spatial dimension. It is a hyperdimensional molecule carrying its trip on the outside of itself in this world. The hyperdimensional nature of this material is such that it is all material, concepts, events, words, people, and ideas homogenized into one thing via the higher dimensional alchemy of mind. Many questions occur concerning the phenomenology of this temporal hologram as fluid matrix. We speculate it is hyperdimensionally metabolized tryptamine, an alchemical phenomenon which is a correct union of tryptamine, a compound nearly ubiquitous in organic nature, with vocally produced sound mediated by mind. It is the mind that directs this process, and that direction consists of a harmonic attunement to an interiorized audiolinguistic phenomenon, which may be an electron spin resonance tone of the psilocybin molecule. When this tone is locked in on, a process which consists of vocally imitating the interior tone to perfection, the hyperdimensional tryptamine is produced. Is this substance mental, as an idea is mental? Is it as real as an ordinary liquid, like water? Harner insisted that Hivaro shamans, under the influence of MAO-inhibiting tryptamines plus Banisteriopsis copy infusions, produce a fluorescent liquid by means of which they accomplish all their magic. Though invisible to ordinary perception, this fluid is said to be visible to anyone who has ingested the brew. Yahé is frequently associated with violet auras and deep blue hallucinations. This may indicate a thermal plasma, perhaps only visible in the UV spectrum. If this phenomenon is found to fall into the category mental indicated above, it would function as described, but with the limitation of not being tangential to ordinary space-time. It will still represent perfected understanding of the hyperdimension, Jung named the collective unconscious.
Thermal plasma, perhaps only visible in the ultraviolet spectrum. If this phenomenon is found to fall into the category mental indicated above, functioning as described, but with limitations of not being tangential to ordinary space-time, it will still represent perfected understanding of the hyperdimension Jung named the collective unconscious. Looking back from a vantage point of nearly 8 years on these notes makes them appear naive. At the time when I first read them, I doubted what I read, since it seemed to go against the grain of common sense, and at that time I could not really understand them. Today, after years of education pushed toward understanding the events at La Chorrera, these ideas seem as magically near and yet as far as they did then. We had a theory, and we had experiences, and we linked them through an experiment that is preposterous unless there is some seed of operational truth in the bizarre ideas born in that period. The years pass and the theories deepen. What you call time is actually man, the oracular voice of the mushroom ventured recently to tell me. So it is that years later I still pursue and still do not understand the angelic glossolalia that psilocybin makes possible for the thinking mind and the singing voice. Is it, I now wonder, an language of emotions that originates in that unexplored part of the brain that is a reflection of Broca's area, but which is on the other non-dominant side of the brain? Could there be a language so intense and so emotional that no cultural conventions of meaning would be necessary to understand? A language of emotion so intense that though it would be conveyed by vocal sound, its richness would be so great that it would be the equivalent of a telepathic ray? Today I think so, and with the aid of psilocybin I labor carefully to perfect it. I believe that it is a subroutine of the human organism, an ancient shamanic art of using sound to convey incredible emotion so intense that its power is truly magical. Perhaps these ideas are no more than Dennis were then concerning the meaning of the powers of psilocybin. What unites the two perceptions is the sense of a nearby mystery of tremendous importance. Elusive as the mystery has been, that sense of its imminence has never left my experience. Mysteries are not unsolved problems. They are things which in their very nature are mysterious. I would have not believed such a thing possible had I. Dennis, who had been rather withdrawn and snappish with everyone since his experience and its mixed reception, had wandered down the forest trail in the direction of the Witoto village 13 kilometers away. He had taken his notebook. In the middle of the afternoon he returned. He was very excited, and he had completed writing out the preliminary notes for what became the experiment at La Chorrera. It was the only written record of his ideas that was actually made at the time, and as such is the only piece of written primary evidence that we have about how we both viewed what we were doing as we were doing it. These notes do not, of course, represent the final form of our theorizing about these matters. Refinement of these ideas has been constant since their creation. These notes are not to be taken at face value at all. The scientific basis of our work is elaborately described in The Invisible Landscape. That work represents our considered composite opinion as of 1975. The present work is the story of the growth of those ideas through time and shows the fallacies and myths spun into the fabric of the first conception of these ideas. But how complete the vision was and how finely worked its detail, the working understanding that is represented in these notes of my brother's, are the operational basis of the effect that we did trigger on the 5th of March. His notes were our working myth, and they did have great effectiveness. They are not, however, for the reader faint of heart. They are like the words of a magical incantation. Magicians will wish to linger over them. The rest of us might wish to skim over them and hurry on with what is, even without the theory, a ripping good story.
2 March. Further experiments with the audio warp phenomenon yesterday raised some interesting new questions and enhance our ongoing understanding. I chose the term audio warp because my experience thus far, coupled with what I have been told, leads me to believe that this all has to do with vocally generating a specific kind of energy field which can rupture three-dimensional space. I do not understand if the field is electromagnetic, but it seems to bend space in such a way as to turn it upon itself through a higher dimension. Here is how it is done. One must take enough psilocybin to allow the sound to be audible. This sound we understand to be the ESR of the resonating psilocybin alkaloids within the mushroom. The presence of rapidly metabolizing high-energy tryptamines within the yahe acts as antenna that sensitizes the neural matrix to the spin resonance energy of the stropharia psilocybin. It is this principle that allows the signal to be made audible. It must then be amplified via the tryptamine admixture antenna to what is felt to be its fullest amplitude. Then, via vocal sound, this energy is placed into the harmine complex within the body and within the mushroom, which has been, in some small part, cooled to absolute zero, the temperature at which molecular vibration ceases through absorption of the psilocybin ESR pulses. Once this ESR wave has been audibly detected, it will be possible to amplify it within the neural circuits by channeling it through the harmine complex. That is, by imitating the psilocybin ESR with the voice, causing the amplified sound to strike a harmonic tone with the harmine metabolizing in the brain, thereby exciting the harmine ESR. Since harmine complexes are merely further down the same biosynthetic pathway that converts tryptophan into psilocybin, it is possible to consider the ESR tone of psilocybin as a harmonic overtone of harmine and vice versa. Using harmonic overtones, it is possible to sound a tone which will cancel one or more of its octaves reflected in harmonic scales above and below it. This is easily demonstrated on a cello. Suppose a tone, say the open string A, is sounded. The sound is a wave vibration of air molecules caused by the string which acts as a resonator. The tone is heard most loudly in the key in which it was sounded, but it also sounds every other key of A in the octaves above and below it. It is possible to cancel out the original tones by touching the string very lightly at certain harmonic points. When this is done, the overtones in the higher and lower registers become audible. If one understands the theory of harmonic resonators well enough, one can determine which overtones will be resonated if certain points on the string are touched. When this understanding is applied to molecular ESR resonation, it remains essentially the same in principle. When the ESR tone of the psilocybin is heard via tryptamine antenna, it will strike a harmonic tone in the harmine complexes being metabolized within the system, causing its ESR to begin to resonate at a higher level. According to the principles of tonal physics, this will automatically cancel out the original tone, that is, the psilocybin ESR, and cause the molecule to cease to vibrate. However, the ESR tone that sustains the molecular coherency is carried for a microsecond on the overtonal ESR of the harmine complex. This leaves the momentarily electrically cancelled and superconductive psilocybin suspended in a low-energy electromagnetic field generated by the harmine ESR. In so doing, it will regain its original, but now superconductively amplified ESR signal, which will permanently lock it into a superconductive state. As this phenomenon proceeds, it will automatically trigger the inverse of the initial process. The psilocybin superconductively charged by mind will harmonically cancel the ESR resonance of the harmine within the brain. The energy of the harmine psilocybin complex ESR will be absorbed instantly into the matrix of the mushroom. This will cause these molecules, metabolizing within the body and bonded to neural DNA, to instantly drop to absolute zero. Clearly, this harmine psilocybin DNA complex must immediately separate itself from the cellular matrix. There is great danger at this moment, but pathways exist to deal with it. We will find that these molecules condense out of our bodies, accompanied by a sound. This sound will be the harmonic ESR tone of this complex, amplified superconductively and broadcasted frozen into the superconductive matrix of the mushroom. The superconductively charged psilocybin acts as an antenna which picks up the amplified ESR signals of the complex and condenses vibrational signals into a superconductive matrix. The opus can now be briefly summarized. The mushroom must be taken and heard. The yahe must be taken and charged with the overtonal ESR of the psilocybin via voice-imparted amplified sound. The ESR resonance of the psilocybin in the mushrooms will be cancelled and it will drop into a superconducting state. A small portion of the physical matter of the mushroom will be obliterated. The superconductively charged psilocybin will pick up the ESR harmonic of the yahe complex. This energy will be instantly and completely absorbed by the higher dimensional tryptamine template. It will be transferred to the mushroom as vocal sound and condensed onto the psilocybin as a bonded complex of superconductive harmine psilocybin DNA. The result will be a molecular aggregate of hyperdimensional superconducting matter that receives and sends messages transmitted by thought, that stores and retrieves information in a holographic fashion in neural DNA, and that depends on superconductive harmine as a transducer energy source, and superconductive RNA as a temporal matrix. This aggregate will be a living and functioning part of the brain of the molecular singer who creates it. It will be composed of higher dimensional matter, that is, matter that has been turned through the higher dimension via the process of canceling its electrical charge with a harmonic vibration, transmitting that vibration across space from superconductive transmitter to superconductive receiver, and then recondensing that vibration onto a superconductive template, the charged psilocybin in the mushroom, until the harmine psilocybin DNA complex condenses into a superconducting molecule. A molecule that is hyperdimensional matter would, by this theory, remain so as long as it remains in a superconducting configuration, probably forever, since it is powered by its own ESR energy. It will then be responsive to commands via endogenous tryptamine ESR, thoughts. It will be keyed into our collective DNAs, and it will contain harmine as a superconductive transceiver and power source.
It was his idea, and it seemed to me a magnificent one, that the body is like an undiscovered musical and scientific instrument whose potential lies all around and within us, but of which we are unaware. He said that the mind, through an act of will, could use the singing voice to interact with the brain as though it were a color organ and a holographic library all wrapped into one. Dennis pointed the way toward a kind of Orphic science where the great advances would be made using only the interaction of the quaternity of singing voice, mind, brain, and imagination. More, however, than a chant-induced collective synesthesia was promised. He was saying that the laws of acoustics and low-amperage bioelectrical phenomena could be manipulated to give the experimenter a doorway into exploring states of matter and realms of physics of high energy and low temperature that are currently, at least, supposed to be the exclusive province of researchers totally dependent on extremely technically sophisticated and powerful instruments. It became possible for a moment to dream that the powers of shamanism derived from a millennium-old knowledge of microphysics and bioelectronics that was actually far in advance of our own. Perhaps the shamanic traditions of this planet
are the keepers of a path of understanding that uses the human body, brain, mind as its cutting edge, and which leaves the present state of the art which our own scientific method has achieved a very poor second. This is really an old idea, the siren song of Pythagoras, that the mind is more powerful than any imaginable particle accelerator, more sensitive than the most powerful radio or optical telescope, more powerful in its grasp of information than any computer, that the human body, its organs, its voice, its power of locomotion, and its imagination is a more than sufficient means to the exploration of any place, time, or energy level in the universe. It was this idea that he would set out to prove, to realize in the actual hardware of this dimension a roving lenticular vehicle which he was convinced could be generated out of his own body DNA and things present at hand in the Amazonian environment, the mushroom and the ayahuasca. That day, March 3rd, we all pulled roots and stacked them in the sun. It seemed the most satisfying activity imaginable. Nothing could have seemed more right. That evening we made a tape of our intentions, but unfortunately our tape recorder was not in good working order, and that tape has proven impossible to salvage. It is a loss to be regretted, since the emotional content of what we were experiencing would come across most clearly from our own words. The taping session ranged over a number of themes. Hypercarbolation, for such we had named the process of altering the neural DNA and changing a human being into an eternal hyperdimensional being. Hypercarbolation, for such we had named the process of altering the neural DNA and changing humanity into an eternal hyperdimensional being. Hypercarbolation, for such we had named the process of altering the neural DNA and changing humanity into an eternal hyperdimensional being. Hypercarbolation, for such we had named the process of altering the neural DNA and changing man into an eternal hyperdimensional being. It was a process that we imagined associated with sexual generation. We spoke of it as the birth of an idea, in a sense whose literalness is not easy to convey to minds that have not brushed with schizophrenia. We hoped that mind, driven by will to the good, could enter into the process of generation and guide it toward the production of the imagination-modulated resurrection body, so dear to Origen and modern UFO enthusiasts. The dead. We believed that hypercarbolation was to be the shamanic defeat of death, that those doorways the dead enter through daily were finally to be thrown open to a hypercarbolated humanity that would then have freedom of movement to and from an eternity in which the species was a living reality. The presence of our dead mother, or Carl Jung, Newton and Bruno, Pythagoras and Heraclitus, was an overwhelming and all-inclusive intuition that we shared and could not ignore. There seemed to be an ideological lineage whose task was the shattering of the historical continuum through the generation of the living lapis of hypercarbolated humanity. All these visionary thinkers had worked on their part of this project. Now, as the secret work of human history, the generation of Adam's cosmic body, lost since paradise, neared completion, these shades stirred and pressed near to our Amazonian campsite as we became the human atoms critical to the inception of the transformation of man into a galaxy-roving bodhisattva, the culmination and quintessence of the highest aspirations of spawning, star-coveting humanity. The psychologist will recognize this as a description of messianic ego inflation. Such it is, but we felt these things as anyone would feel them if they truly believed themselves to be in the position that we believed ourselves to be in. We wondered why us? To such questions the mushroom spoke in my mind without hesitation. Because you have diligently sought the good, and because you trusted no human being more than yourself. The emotional impact of these sorts of exchanges was intense beyond anything I have ever experienced. I felt humbly grateful to the point of tears. I felt exalted. We wanted to salvage paradise for humanity, and we thanked all gods and nature that our eccentric quest, out of all the lives and paths being lived on the earth, was placed by fate to be so near the cutting edge. Where the elder shamanism had failed, we would succeed. The rescue of the timeless pearl of human immortality from the well of death would, through the act of hypercarbolation, become a living reality for every person who had ever lived. All the pain and suffering and war and desperation would somehow be replayed and made right through the intercession of the mystery of higher dimensions and backward-flowing time. The wave of understanding that had been gaining since the 27th of January was now about to crest. The wave was so strong as to be nearly visible in everything around us. The lenticular shape of the approaching lapis seemed to be everywhere that I looked. Every shape and form around me was pregnant with its unearthly, opalescent depths. Before our small party of fellow explorers, Dennis and I wept and exulted, addressing the living and the dead with equal candor, saying things that should have been said years before, and things that could not have even been imagined only hours before. We knew that we were behaving bizarrely and were highly emotional, but the intensifying wave of understanding that had gathered itself around us explained all of this. It was, we were assured and assured each other, because ahead of us in time the experimental attempt at hypercarbolation had already succeeded. So many lines of probable fate were sweeping toward the staggering moment of culmination that its inevitability was already sending shock waves and distorted images of the millennium crashing backwards through time. Dennis recently reminded me that I assured all present that so inevitable had our experiment become that if we did not tend the fire and brew the yahe, then these things would be done by themselves. Dry wood rustling out of the forest, gathering itself into the ring of firestones, and there to burst into flames. The yahe spontaneously shredding and immersing itself in the waiting pot of water. At the time, this was an easy extrapolation from the hurricane of shamanic gnosis and synchronistic coincidences that was both confirming our success to come and at the same time distorting the very ontological basis of our reality as the inevitable chorro of time and necessity narrowed around us and the black hole of the hypercarbolation attempt strengthened its grip on us and drew us with ever-increasing inevitability toward the singularity in time where an unimaginable transformation awaited all on our planet. A transformation so beyond rational understanding that its scattered and distorted reflections were mysteries in the keeping of reason-flaunting religions that have haunted human thinking since the dimmest beginning. Chapter 10, More on the Opus. The next day, the 4th of March, dawned hot and clear. After we made breakfast, we did not tear down our fire, as would have normally been the case. Instead, we began to brew the carefully shredded Banisteriopsis caapi wood in several gallons of spring water. The fire made from the gnarled and now sun-baked roots burned furiously. The pot responded with an even rolling boil that is the correct condition for making the drug. All afternoon long we cooked and said little. Dave and Vanessa were to join us for a light meal early in the evening, and then they had agreed to withdraw from the group and allow the Yahé taking and the experimental test of hypercarbolation to go on without them. I am sure that Dennis' mind, far more than my own, was preoccupied with the details of the test. During the days preceding, he had been often irritable, and this I took to be a part of the spectrum of effects accompanying whatever odd sort of mental unfoldment he was going through. While he was thus occupied with interior issues and vistas, I was the hawk-eyed guardian of the shamanic fires and procedures. There recently had been much discussion of fire and the role it must have played in forming the mental world of human beings. Once, as we sat staring into the campfire, Dennis had remarked to me that people have been looking into fires like this for thousands and thousands of years. The squeal of these coals is the release of ionized plasma, and into the flickering walls of waves of free electrons thus created, one can see into the past and the future. The fire is the place where the ideas come from. I was silent. I felt our ancestors then, seemingly present on the other side of the interface represented by the flame. What is happening to us? I asked it myself again, but said nothing, silence seeming more eloquent. Dennis wrote furiously part of the day as follows. March 4th. It is now possible to reconstruct the physical-chemical idea that has evolved in the process of understanding this phenomenon, i.e. the fourth-dimensional rotation of matter. I understand from examining the linguistic model we have constructed that the waveform ESR interference that will accompany the work operates in a somewhat different manner than I had thought. It can be explained thus. The psilocybin that occurs in the mushroom acts as an antenna for picking up and amplifying the harmonic ESR tones of all tryptophan-derived compounds of all living organisms within its range. Since the psilocybin undergoing metabolism is superconductive, this means that its range of reception is theoretically infinite, and the antenna does, to some degree, pick up a signal whose ultimate origin is the totality of living creatures. But since the psilocybin metabolism is carried on within the brain or mushroom at a very low voltage level, the antenna behaves as though its range was limited, even though it is superconductive. It seems clear, therefore, that the signal, which on the mushroom and in this ecologically dense area can be discerned so clearly, originates in the ESR resonation of the Yahé plant, though perhaps all of the biosphere is picked up and broadcast amplified via the Yahé superconductive transducer. This understanding will clarify precisely what will occur at the moment of fourth-dimensional warp. Ingesting the Yahé harmine will speed up the process of metabolism enough to amplify its ESR tone to an audible level. This ESR tone will harmonically cancel out the ESR tone of the psilocybin within the mushroom, causing it to lose its electric field and snap into a superconducting configuration. The Yahé ESR signal will have keyed the mushroom psilocybin into a superconducting antenna. It is then ready to have the psilocybin harmine DNA compound being metabolized within the body, condensed onto its charged template. A microsecond after the mushroom psilocybin has been superconductively charged, its amplified ESR wave will then cancel out the ESR signals of the tryptamines and harmine metabolizing in the body, as well as the genetic material. This will cause these compounds to drop into a superconductive configuration and bond together, at the exact same time that they bond to the waiting mushroom template. The transfer of superconductive compounds charged within the body to a superconductive template prepared within the mushroom will not occur in three-dimensional space. No actual physical transfer will be visible, as the organically processed superconductive material will bond itself to the mushroom template through a higher spatial dimension. The result will be the work of works, that wonder which cannot be told, 4 dimensions captured and delineated in 3. The stone will be all things, but the elements which are bound together in hyperspace to form it are among the most common natural products, and the function and place of each in the stone can be understood. The stone is a solid-state hyperdimensional circuit that is quadripartite in structure. First, psilocybin, charged in the mushroom to act as a template on which the rest of the circuit is condensed. In the final stone, the psilocybin acts as a superconducting antenna to pick up on information diffused through space and time. Second, the superconductively charged harming complex within the stone will act as its transmitter and energy source. It is interesting to note that the same energy that sustains the antenna circuits in superconductivity will sustain the whole of the device. The third component of the stone is the DNA, bonded to and resonating through the harming. It will constitute the hyperdimensional holographic memory of the device and will contain and explicate the genetic history of all species. It will be the collective memory of the device, and all times and places and conceivable forms will be accessible within its matrix. The fourth part of the circuit will be the RNA, which will also be superconductively charged. Through its function of self-replication turned through hyperspace, the RNA will be able to project a waveform, three-dimensional holographic image, and thus it will give form instantly to any idea. It will perform the same function it has always had, the process of replication through time, but henceforth replication will be subject in part to the whim of consciousness. Why I and my companions have been selected to understand and trigger the Gestalt wave of understanding that will be the unleashing of the hyperspatial zeitgeist is becoming more clear to me each moment, though I know I won't understand our mission fully until the work is complete. We will be instructed in the use of the stone by some infinitely wise, infinitely adept fellow member of the hyperspatial community. Of that I feel sure. It will be the taking of the keys to galactarian citizenship. I speculate that we will be the first 5 human beings to be instructed in its use. Our mission will be to selectively disseminate it to the rest of humanity, but slowly and in such a way as to ease the culture shock. It is also somehow appropriate that at least some segment of the species have an intimation of the implications and possibilities of this, the last cultural artifact. And so now, against all probabilities and chance and circumstance, my companions and I have been given the peculiar privilege of knowing history will end. It would be a strange position to find oneself in if being in that position did not bring with it a full understanding of what forces it was that brought one there. Fortunately, as the phenomenon is an acceleration of understanding, one gains clearer insight into the forces that have bent space and time and thought and culture back upon themselves to focus them at this point. Now I can look back upon my life as spread before the scanner of memory and understand all those moments that foreshadow this one. It is easy to look beyond the personal history to the events of history and discern therein the prefiguration of this last moment. As a phenomenon, it has always existed, and it will continue, for it is the moving edge of phenomenal understanding that was generated in the era before physics and has gathered momentum, a constant acceleration ever since. What we are moving toward in 3 dimensions is the passing of this wave of understanding into a higher dimension, the realm of the atemporal. As it happens, it will make this transition through one of us, but there will be no change in this cosmic order, or even a blip on the cosmic circuits, for the phenomenon has gathered constant momentum from the beginning, and it will flow through and beyond all dimensions with the same smoothness it entered, until finally it has moved through all being in all dimensions. Its joy will then be complete when in a vast amount of time it has constellated full understanding throughout creation. If we trigger the eschatology, we will appear to act in the role of the Antichrist. But the real Antichrist is history's distorted reflection of the Christ at the end of time, the cosmic Adam Anthropos. The eschatological Christ is Antichrist only from a historical perspective. It is interesting that among the Mazatecans the idea of Christ is linked to the mushroom. Is this syncretism or prophecy? That evening's collective meal with Dave and Vanessa at our camp with the Yahe infusion cooling in the background was less than successful, for by now positions relative to the phenomenon had polarized into irreconcilability. They arrived near the close of day and joined us in the hut for a smoke. Discussion led to an update and rehash of the experiment proposed for the evening. Dennis spoke. We will obtain a metabolizing living mushroom, dig up the shit around it, and physically move the whole thing to the hut. We want to do the bonding in the mushroom because we don't know what it would be like if it were done in our own bodies. It's wide open. With your voice, your mind, and a mushroom, these things can be done. That is all one needs. Accelerators, all of that? No. With the energy that is hundreds of times less than the energy in an ordinary flashlight battery, one can probably rend space-time apart. The air was heavy with charged ions. Dave was full of doubt. As he talked, there was the grumble of distant thunder far off over the jungle. Dave's objections to what we were doing were emotional and fearful, hardly what we expected from a colleague. We tried to be reassuring, but he became agitated and rushed out of the hut, perhaps, we thought, intending to walk back to the river house. Instead, we heard an exclamation of fear and a kind of moan, a yell for us. We all clambered out of the hut to find Dave white-faced and staring at the sky, pointing. The light of a first-quarter moon revealed the tattered sky, and directly above the path returning to the river was an enormous black thunderhead rearing its twisting and writhing form up through thousands of feet of moisture and electricity-saturated air. It looked like an enormous whirlwind with broad strokes of lightning flickering out of its lower portions, touching the tops of the jungle canopy with a roar that was as deafening as field artillery when it broke over us. Over the roar of the wind that was now whipping the jungle all around us into a wild frenzy, I heard Dennis yell, "It's a reflection of the approaching breakthrough. It says to me there is now no doubt we'll succeed." From Dave, a moan as he sank unbelieving to the sandy soil as the first huge drops began to fall. I thought of King Lear. In the wake of an ear-splitting blast, we all fell back to the hut. In a few minutes, the giant storm moved on, leaving only a chaotic and churning sunset. The sudden electrical storm and its impact on us was taken as an omen by all points of view. We assumed it was associated with a feedback of effects from the experiment, whose performance was now only a few hours ahead of us. Dave and Vanessa thought it a light dose of the wrath of God for having such Promethean aspirations. In returning to the hut to escape the onset of the storm, Vanessa had sprained her ankle by slipping from the notched log that served as the stepladder into the hut. "Is this the healing of my split tea that my astrologer foretold for this time?" Scorpio Vanessa asked of no one in particular. Dennis ate nothing. Ev and I shared a light meal with our guests. They wished us good night and good luck, and hobbled away toward the river. The three of us were then left alone, and there remained nothing for it but to make the test that Dennis had devised and whose anticipation had caused so much strain on our expedition. The yahe had been brewed. Through having seen ayahuasca brewed professionally by shamans in Peru since, I am sure that our brew was too weak to have had any major role in what happened. It was the mushroom that was the causal agent, if a causal agent could in fact be isolated. And mushrooms we had, both picked ones as well as specimens moved into the hut in situ in their manure bases. Living, metabolizing psilocybin and psilocin should be present, we thought. We had hung the chrysalis butterfly near the mushroom, so that animal tissue undergoing metamorphosis should also be represented in the target area tableau. What was science and what ritual, we did not know and could not tell. They had become fused. Chapter 11. The Experiment at La Chorrera. The night was absolutely black. A low-lying cloud bank had appeared, muffling the small world of La Chorrera and wrapping it in a bowl of all-absorbing velvet darkness. Following the storm, we had rebuilt our fire and had driven off several liters of water from our infusion of Banisteriopsis caapi, so it was much strengthened over what it had been before. We then added crushed leaves that Dennis had gathered that day near the Chorro, and which we were using as DMT admixture plants. We did this because we had tentatively identified these plants as Justicia pectoralis variety stenophylla, a plant commonly used as an admixture of yahe in the Valpes drainage. Now, years after that evening, I question both the concentration at which we brewed the Banisteriopsis and our identification of the admixture plant. There is no doubt that there was considerable harmine alkaloid in the infusion, but not so much as I later learned was necessary to provoke an unambiguous intoxication. The harmine alkaloids present were, in my opinion, boosted by the psilocybin accumulated in our systems, or rather, the MAO inhibiting effect of the beta-carbolines caused the residual psilocybin to emerge into consciousness as a deep hallucinogenic experience. While I completed the boiling, Ev and Dennis went to their hammocks and lay down to await the completion of the preparations. We laughed together and talked softly. Yet in spite of this, there was an undercurrent of tension as we approached the experiment into which so much of our energy had been poured. It was very critical. They were becoming very clumsy and seemed to find their bodies hard to handle. It was that which had sent them to their hammocks. I said that I would do whatever needed attention. Our little hut on its stilts looked in the flickering firelight like a small spaceship dropped into the howling jungles of an alien world. We all felt like we were approaching hyperspatial overdrive. There was a sense of immense energies accumulating. The effect was reinforced by the hammocks hanging like acceleration slings ready to receive a starship's crew. Dennis lay in his hammock, nearly unable to hold a pencil, but writing furiously in tight operational terms about the experiment just ahead. The mushroom is presently metabolizing within our bodies. This has keyed in on the tryptamine template in the living mushroom, and it has been sensitized for the condensation of the harmine psilocybin DNA molecule. When the yahe is ingested, the harmine analog will start to metabolize within the body. The ESR of the pre-sensitized psilocybin circuit will immediately cancel the ESR of the harmine and cause it to bond superconductively to the DNA-RNA complex both in our bodies and in the mushroom simultaneously in a higher dimension. The bonding completed, the harmine DNA memory bank and drive unit will condense into the waiting charged psilocybin circuit in the mushroom. We will see this condensation as it will appear in the mushroom at the same instant that the bond is completed in a higher dimension. We will see this condensation as it will appear in the mushroom at the same instant that the bond is completed in a higher dimension. Dennis explained that he was unable to move very well because something having to do with the backward flow of time and the ever-increasing constraints on the set of possible futures had rendered him nearly immobile. Only the mind, planning and computing, was free. I finished boiling the yahe. I ground the admixture plants and added them to the cooling brew. I moved the yahe into the hut, then the mushroom. Those things in place, we were ready to begin. Prior to this point, we had taken no hallucinogens for several days. The effects we were experiencing were not arising from that source. Something else was happening. Dennis was now narrating our countdown toward an omega point that none of us could really understand. We were completely transformed with the expectation that possibly we would witness the outbreak of the millennium. He said that time was appearing to slow down as we approached this point. As proof, or rather witness, to this amazing assertion, he called our attention to the candle that I had set upon a small shelf jutting from the wall of the hut. Unattended, its slight tilt had become slowly exaggerated, so that now it hung at a crazy angle, defying gravity because, he said, time was passing so slowly that we could not see that it was actually in the act of falling. I walked closer to this apparition and bent toward the flame. It appeared still, absolutely frozen. My mind shot back to the moment above the river when it too had seemed stilled forever. The flame was uncanny. As deeply as I cared to look into it, I could see no movement of particles or gas. We, or I, seemed to have my usual freedom of movement, but the world around me was coming to a crystalline and eerie halt. It was Dennis who finally spoke. A series of quantized energy levels have to be broken through in order to bond this thing. It is part mythology, part psychology, part applied physics. Who knows? We will make 3 attempts before we break out of the experimental mode. We all drank the yahe, sending it churning through our guts. Dennis took only 1 mushroom so that he could hear the tone. Darkness was utter, and we had no clocks. It seemed hours since Dave and Vanessa had left us. All was finally in readiness. The living mushroom, the harmine brew, the harmine smoking mixture. After we each had taken a half a cup of the yahe infusion, we settled down to wait. Dennis had been hearing the ESR tone that he deemed the sine qua non of what we were attempting for the past several days. After about 15 minutes, he announced that he could hear it more clearly and that it was gaining strength. He felt prepared to attempt the experiment at any time, he said. We agreed that each time during the actual making of the sound, we would extinguish the candle so that we would not have our minds burdened with any tryptamine-induced facial distortions that the odd yelling might cause. Years before, there had been episodes involving DMT and spasms of facial musculature that were fairly hair-raising for the observer, involving, as they did, the entities of Tantric Buddhism, the bulging eyes, the rolling and possibly long tongues, that sort of thing. Dennis rose up in his hammock then. The candle went out, and he sounded his first howl of hypercarbolation. It was mechanical and loud, like a bull roarer, and ended with a convulsive spasm that traveled throughout his body and landed him out of his hammock on the floor. We relit the candle only long enough to determine that everyone wanted to continue, and agreed that Dennis' next attempt should be made from a sitting position on the floor of the hut. This was done. Again, a long, whirring yodel, strange and unexpectedly mechanical each time it was sounded. I suggested a break before the third attempt, but Dennis was quite agitated and eager to bring it through, as he put it. We settled in for the third yell, and when it came, it was like the others, but lasted much longer and became much louder. It was like an electric siren wailing atomic attack over the still night jungle. Of our Amazon hut was silence, the silence of the transition from one world to another, the silence of the Gidmiago Gap. And then the sound of the crowing of a cock, the cock at the mission. 3 times his call came, clear but from afar, seeming to confirm us as actors on a stage, part of a dramatic contrivance. Dennis had said that if the experiment were successful, the mushroom would be obliterated. The low-temperature phenomena would explode the cellular material, and what would be left would be a standing wave, a violet ring of light the size of the mushroom cap. That would be the holding mode of the lens, or whatever it was. Then someone would take command of it, whose DNA it is, they are it. It is a mind which can be seen and held in one's hand. It is indestructible. It is all space and time. The universe, but a monad, a monadic plasma, which contains all space and time, including one's own mind. Dennis leaned toward the mushroom standing on the raised experiment area. "Look!" As I followed his gaze, he raised his arm, and across the fully expanded cap of the mushroom fell the shadow of his Ruana. Clearly, but only for a moment, as the shadow bisected the glowing carpophore, I saw not a mature mushroom, but a planet, the Earth, lustrous and live, blue and tan and dazzling white. "It is our world." His voice was full of unfathomable emotion. I could only nod. I did not understand, but I saw it clearly, although my vision was only a thing of a moment. "We have succeeded." I don't understand. And I did not. "Let's walk to the pasture. I need to think." Ev was exhausted by the night's activities and probably glad to have us leave her in the hut with the encroaching dawn promising some sort of new day. As we let ourselves down the log ladder to the ground, I was struck by the scene of utter confusion that our activities had left behind during the last frantic hours of brewing the night before. Our huge fire was now only white ashes. The waste from the haymaking was piled beside it, looking like a mound of beached seaweed. Everything seemed strewn about. This we walked through, shaking the stiffness out of our bodies and stopping at the small stream that crossed the path to splash water in our faces. We had not spoken. It was Dennis who broke the silence. "You are wondering if we succeeded." "Yes. What happened? You're writing heard on this effect, so what's going on?" "Well, I'm not sure how, but I know we have succeeded. Let me try to understand this." As we walked on, my own mind was racing with questions, and as we walked along, Dennis' occasional comments were, it burst over me, answers to questions that I was thinking but not articulating. I stopped in my tracks. I clearly formed a question in my mind. Dennis, head bent beside me, began to answer without waiting for me to articulate my thought aloud. I was dumbfounded. Was this it, then, I asked, that he had somehow acquired telepathic powers? No, there was more to it than that. According to Dennis, the bonding of the harmine into his DNA had given him immediate access to an enormous cybernetically stored fund of information, and this information was freely available to anyone in the world who looked into their mind and prefaced their question with the word Dennis. The absurdity of the second half of this proposition struck me as utterly too much. But naturally, at his insistence, I made the test. I picked up a small plant growing at my feet and closed my eyes and asked, "Dennis, what is the name of this plant?" Immediately, and without any effort of my own that I was aware of, a scientific name, now forgotten, popped into my head. I tried the same thing again with a different plant, and to my amazement received a different answer. The experiment seemed to secure that something was giving answers in my head, but I could not tell if they were correct or not. I was shaken. When we had left the hut on this walk, I was sure that we had failed and that we had to talk over revising our approach. I even felt relief, since the obsessive nature of it all had been a strain. But now, as we walked along, and I could hear a voice in my head that was answering, however inanely or inaccurately, any question put to it, I was less sure. Dennis was oddly preoccupied, yet he assured me that his effort had succeeded and that all over the world the wave of hypercarbolation was sweeping through the human race, eliminating the distinction between the individual and the community as everyone discovered themselves spontaneously pushing off into a telepathic ocean whose name was that of its discoverer, Dennis McKenna. As I watched my mind and listened to my brother rave, I began to realize that the experiment had indeed unleashed some sort of bizarre effect. Why it was that I was able to make the leap from assuming that we were having a peculiar localized experience to the idea that we were key parts of a mankind-wide phenomena is an important unanswered question, speaking volumes about my susceptibility to suggestion at that moment. I was quite simply the victim of a cognitive hallucination. That is, rather than a visual experience of something not actually present, a hallucination that is a total shift of the highest levels of our cognitive relationship to the world. The psilocybin-induced cognitive hallucination made the impossible and unlikely seem probable and reasonable. I was becoming flooded with ecstasy as the realization came over me that we had passed the omega point and that we were now operating in the first few moments of the millennium. Both of us could feel the excitement in us rising toward the realization that the world was now somehow radically different, totally different, in a fundamental way. Dennis spoke.
So, this must be it. We have not condensed the stone into visible space, but we have generated it in our heads. It does not immediately appear as a visible vehicle, but first as a teaching. The teaching we hear in our heads right now. Later, the Word will be made flesh.
Flesh. I could only stare at my brother. Who is he, and how is he able to know and do these things? I could only wonder.
Now, Mother and possibly lots of dead people will be showing up soon. Young, he will doubtless come, and Einstein too, and by God, I want to hear what they have to say.
We were embracing each other and laughing. I felt as though I was being led like a little child. For no reason I had ceased to question. Rather, I felt an urge to see other people and feel their immersion in the new heaven and the new earth. As I set out toward the river, I seemed to myself to be nearly weightless. I felt reborn. I felt full of energy and bursting with good health and vitality. Over a period of a few minutes, I had passed from weary, disgruntled skeptic to ecstatic believer. Looking back on it, I believe that for me this was the critical juncture. Why did I not question Dennis more closely? Was I somehow self-hypnotized? Did the unfamiliar setting, the restricted diet, strain, and expectations push me into a place where I was unable to resist participation of a sort in the world of my brother's bizarre ideation? Why was I unable to maintain my detached and skeptical viewpoint? In some sense, this willing suspension of disbelief is the crux of the matter, and, I believe, of many a close encounter situation. The other plays with us and approaches us through the imagination, and then a critical juncture is reached. To go beyond this juncture requires abandonment of will and habit. At that moment, the world turns lazily inside out, and what was hidden is revealed, a magical modality, a different epigenetic landscape than one has known, a landscape become real. The UFO is a creature of this previously invisible landscape. It is Lord of the skies of the imagination, able to carry anyone with it who will but play, and then let the play deepen and deepen.
comes from human mouths, but you can't do it by will.
They've been taking mushrooms for a long time. Here's the way Dennis described it to me. He said, Michael, no, or Terence described it to me about, he said, Dennis is totally broken through when you make a sound. And I said, Terence, I don't exactly understand what you mean this. And he says, well, a lot of people don't see it, and it's best that they don't. But there's insect-like anthropologists studying us.
Oh, that's their...
And at the time of making the sound or hearing the sound, this seen or unseen guardian will, I think he said, operate on your mouth. So you can make the sound. Now, here's how that happened to Dennis.
I know
Here's how it happened to Dennis.
There are insect anthropologists studying the human race.
Yes, and it's about, I think he said 12 to 15 feet tall. Description of the
Sure. Yeah.
in Castaneda.
Yeah.
But he's
Yeah.
not just seeing a deity.
Uh-huh.
In his vision of his trip, he's just seeing a deity and having the vision of the deity and going through the experience with the deity. You know, like if you look at...
That's just his physical manifestation.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see it different ways. But that's still...
I think that I hear the sound that is not speakable for sure.
But that's still a form of concept.
Well, anyway, what happened to Dennis was he was just out there taking a piss, but of course it was after at least a week of mushrooms. And he was taking a piss, and a light came out of the ground, and it just began to rumble up from inside him, and he blared out the sound, you know. And after that, Dennis was changed. He was just like Terence. Before, when he came down, he was in the zen and everything. And now he was they're both very tall and skinny. Maybe Dennis is taller. And he just looked down at me, you know, with this bluish haze around his face, and his eyes were so wide open. Like this, looking right into me, saying, Michael, I know you'll make the sound, but will Sarah make the sound? And he was very concerned that Sarah might not make the sound.
You can probably see by that.
It's true. I love it. So you're right. Thank you.
It isn't even a question of believing it, it's a question of believing it. And for Terence, the only way to believe it was to do it. Right? Phenomenological experience. He says, since several people had the same experience, it is true. And therefore, it warrants further investigation.
Sure.
Sure, which is perfectly true, you know. Anyway.
Right.
Truth in one mile.
Well, sure. I'll go look for that one.
Anyways,
Why not?
Yeah.
Check it out along the way.
Oh, what happened after that? This was the important part that I forgot. I think I forgot. Sarah says, let's go down to the Chorrera. I want to photograph the Chorrera. And I say, great, you know, I'll help you carry your tripod. So she's got her Rolleiflex and an Icon. She had read at that time and was going to take some really good pictures of the Chorrera. And on the way down there, we meet this incredibly old and very, very strange Indian man who was just being brought into La Chorrera because it was the nuns are back at school time, children, everybody bring the children in. And all the town was filled up. They gave us the weird jungle fruits that I never imagined.
Name something like.
Well, it was one that was very strange. It's shaped like a giant mango. It was dark brownish green, and it had a big, thick stem on one end. And you cut the top off, and it produced. The only bad thing about the fruit was that it produced this latex which stuck all over your lips from the top to the bottom. It was heaven. You know. The people that sold us that were also selling brooms. Brooms. Beautiful, beautiful handmade brooms. And this was the weirdo in the community. Here's what he looked like. Incredibly old. He looked like a mummy that I saw in a mummy.
Wow.
He was so, his skin perfectly stretched, and he's just sitting there. What he was wearing was a uniform made out of khaki material, which looked like it had been taken apart and sewed inside out. Spotlessly clean, but it was very, very strange. I mean, it looked like it was especially made to look messy in a neat sort of way. You know, and he had this little fur bag. The only thing that wasn't khaki was this little fur bag, and even that had a khaki strap on it. Right? And
like cotton khaki.
He's talking Witoto. He obviously doesn't. And he's talking Witoto to his daughter, who's obviously with mission eyes, you know, wearing this cute little 1950 type dress and the ribbon in her hair. And the woman then says to us in Spanish, "¿De dónde están? ¿De dónde están? Where are you from?" And then we say, "Nuevo York." And the old man goes, "Nuevo York." And he shakes his head and he has a big smile on his face. And then Sarah turns to me and whispers, "It's almost like you flew over to the Terence." Inside this room, you know, just to at the house, a very innocent thing to do. And we go down and photograph the Chorrera. Well, Sarah's photographing the Chorrera. There it is. I find my first psychedelic plant. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It is Psychotria. Maybe you want to write this one down. Psychotria,
yes, I certainly
Psychotrifolia.
Yes, just a second here. Psychotria, Psychotrifolia.
Here, you want to pass a book I can make?
Yes, do. Whatever you want to write down. Oh, it's a great pen. You'll love it. Here, go to it.
We got another twist.
I have a desire to have everything readable.
They got stuff down here better than you ever had in the outside world. Things that just do things to your mind.
Psychotria,
Folia.
Outside of the jungle?
No, inside the jungle.
I'll describe this plant to
outside
you, and you know what the fucking botanist who told me there's no poisonous mushrooms in Colombia except the Anita, he said, he described it perfectly. He said you'll find it near rushing water. I found it right next to the shore.
Right.
And it's around 2 to 3 feet tall.
Yeah, 2 or 3 feet tall.
Rushing water. He said you might find it near waterfall or rushing stream. That's very good.
Who said it? Do I know him? Is he on
His
there?
name is Dr.
They gave you why you so why you were there.
Yeah. No. He's good old guy, I think.
So you have had all of these things too?
I probably didn't have a lot of it what Michael had, but
You've had other.
No, I didn't have that many because we chickened out. Sarah and I chickened out, man. We were not part of the experiment. As soon as we moved into the policeman's house, we were chickened.
Really?
Because, well, you know, I was still interested, and I was pretty much interested in doing the ayahuasca, even though I wasn't into eating mushrooms all the time. And, you know, the changes were very subtle. We were in a very crazy place, and it's very, very hard to judge sanity levels. Now, of course, these people are weird to begin with, and they have strange ideas, so you have a hard time placing yourself.
Gee, that's something.
Well, you can place yourself, but sometimes you don't place yourself. You can sense for a long time that something's wrong, but it takes a while for you to do that.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
it's just so intense that everything that you are will just manifest. Every fear, every desire, everything you are will just come out.
Yep.
Because you'll be, like it's crazy in the outside world, you can kind of make it through scenes, you know, and like never really expect any danger to come your way unless you really walk into a hidden neighborhood. But like in the Amazon, all of a sudden you're in the nature where if you're the hunter, you're really hunted as well. And that's a heavy realization. Just that, because you feel that vibration will hit you really fast. And then from there you start to find out who you are as you try to walk around or pass through.
The intense life-death cycle exists in the jungle. It's the quickest turnover of life for more life. Exactly, it's just always consuming.
And changing.
And changing.
And you see that every time you wake up, you really arises in every day that you're real.
Right.
Then it starts to reflect back at you that you're a part of it.
Exactly.
And you
also like the
And there's no removal for it, because you're always getting pointed out how vulnerable you are in that environment.
There's a removal. You can do and get yourself out of there as fast as possible. Or you can do it like some people do, they just go blunt ego. They go with full power just out at it to conquer it. Or you can do it the Indian way, who gets away. He just says, man, I'm not more important than anything else.
Right.
But I have something to figure out. I do have a consciousness. So I have to survive. Can't hold me back until I find out why. So they have some pretty heavy questions.
Well, I'm impressed.
Just about everybody's got heavy questions, too.
Anybody want to hear what psychotropy
Yeah.
looks like?
Yeah.
It's a bush around 2 to 3 feet tall.
Okay.
And it has very pointed leaves that are very regular shaped. Like, very thin and narrow. I tried to draw one here. It was just a skinny little leaf around 2 inches long and 1/2 inch wide.
Great.
And dark green about the color of half.
I know, and it has a white line down the center?
No.
No, forget it.
Glossy leaves. Dark green and
Dark
glossy.
green, okay.
And long and narrow. And the flower is a 5-pointed star, which is blue and white. It's
So
sort
there,
of-
on that?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, 5-pointed flower, blue and white.
And it contains DMT.
It contains DMT, and you have had it from the flower. How do you prepare it?
You mix it up with ayahuasca. And I don't know what the dosage is. Maybe that's another reason why Dennis went weird on us like that.
Well, how's Dennis now? What is he
Oh,
like?
he's fine.
How long was he weird?
Now, I have only been finding from secondary sources. He wrote me a letter months after. Well, you'll hear about how it gets weird. Something so weird happened when we bought the broom that it didn't.
Tell me about the broom.
We took it back to the house, right? After I pulled up carefully, disrooted the cyclotrus and brought it back to the house. And what happened was while Sarah was photographing, right after I discovered the cyclotrifolia, I noticed that there was this caterpillar stuck to the broom, which was around this long, and a chartreuse green covered with little volcanoes. And each volcano had a little drop of ruby color in it. And it was easily the most incredible caterpillar I'd ever seen.
Wow.
And it stuck to the broom, and we photographed it. And we didn't hassle it, and we didn't make it leave, but it seemed to want to stay. We brought the broom home and set it in the corner with the caterpillar that it wanted to be, right? And I'll have to describe the room that we were staying in. Like, it had a long window looking up the hill towards the mission, and then it had a small window looking over towards the river. And at this time, we had already gotten a hut about 1 kilometer into the jungle. We were working on gardens, planting morning glories, onions and garlic, and we planted the ayahuasca. I forgot to tell you that the guy's grandson, the grandmother's grandson that got the ayahuasca to the people, had given them a basket with 3 sticks stuck in a very mystical pattern like this, sort of. That basket was strange because it came to a point, and it was lined with leaves and had these 3 vine sticks sticking out. And the woman told Kunya to, quote, plant it where the sun never shines. Unquote. That was ayahuasca.
That makes sense. It is a nice picture.
Anyway, this caterpillar disappeared. I didn't find it until the next day. As soon as it got in the house, it disappeared. After meditation, I found that it had gone to the room that I meditated in and hung right in the center of the window looking towards the jungle house, right up the hill. And just before my eye, without spinning a cocoon or anything, began to metamorphose. You could see different lines change, and I watched it for a couple of days. And this was around March 2nd. And Terence already had told us, I think, that well, if you don't want to, he says, I think it's better that you don't do it until after we do it, and then we'll guide you through it. So he's sort of baiting us out diplomatically, which was all right with us, but then when he found out about the butterflies, he knows a lot about butterflies. I didn't know anything about it. To me, it was a butterfly that just came to me, and I didn't connect it with secret, right? Because I was still thoroughly obtuse. And the butterflies metamorphosing in the meditation room, and I show it to him. He goes, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" And he took it right down and put it in a little box and said, "This is vital for the experiment."
How do you mean vital?
Look at the whole experiment. Yeah, it was rested upon that caterpillar.
Okay.
Was it that serious?
Well, when I found out, I was pretty amazed when I found out what kind of caterpillar it was. It was a morpholia.
Blue morpho? Is that right? Do they always metamorphose without any...
I don't know. I don't know anything about butterflies. Well, I know something about butterflies.
Well, that's my favorite butterfly.
Yeah, right. It's probably everybody's favorite butterfly. They have to see it.
You know, that's crazy when people start getting...
Blue morpho stream?
It's crazy that it climbed upon the
That's the same
stream.
butterfly.
Here's what's crazy about it in retrospect. It's crazy that caterpillar chose to climb up on that room that weirdo shaman's daughter stole us. That's what's really crazy. And that it went directly from the room to the meditation room to begin metamorphosing. So there was room for craziness and a series of coincidences that happened.
Well, I firmly believe that they are all appropriately aware kinds of experiences.
Yeah, but you can't get hung up on it because then the whole group starts, if it becomes important.
Wow! Well, so what's not important? I mean, it's as important as anything else that you know.
Well, what's really important to parents, I had no idea. I thought it was just a hippie.
People's minds get preoccupied on it, right?
Mine doesn't.
And if your mind's preoccupied on something like that, and the group mind goes that way.
Focus on it.
Yeah, it starts focus, makes it focus on it, makes it real important, in a non-attached way.
Oh, yeah.
That means when they leave, the energy disperses and people are moving through the environment. If they're still hung up in that space, they're not clear. And it makes it dangerous because you don't want to be hung up on any one thing. You want to get through it, examine it, try to find the truth out of it, and cut it loose. So you're right back at the moment. Because now the moment's important. Because if your mind's thinking all the time and you're trying to think and walk, that's your biggest mistake, and you shouldn't even be in trouble. Because if you're thinking and you're not perceiving like what's all around you, you know, and feeling as you're moving through it, like it's like music, you know, like
The more naively approach, the better.
right?
Just being intimate level.
You know, there's the application and practice, you know, using your mind and your body for that. But once you've got that down, it's just, you know, by yourself or with a group, just let that feeling like come out and join together. And that's your strength then. And it's probably your strength anyway. Sure. To live on that. And to live kind of intellectually, you know, if you're trying to rationalize this thing and it's big and important. Wow, it's out of your head. And you're trying to space down the jungle trail there, that might be your day. That might be the day you see this guy come up with some soup. You got bit by a snake and 3 minutes later you fall over and die.
Oh, we don't have to talk about it.
Fall over and die.
Because this story is really fairly happy when you think of snake biting.
Well, we saw pythons and things.
Well, pythons and there's deadly snakes, but like
follow me.
Yeah.
The Indians would take a shot. They went up there and followed me.
I have never encountered a rattlesnake, and I have walked and hiked and marched around and lived and all of those kinds of things in places where rattlesnakes go. And I've seen them in terrariums and things like that.
shit.
But
well, I was right. You got to be together in the jungle, but this trip was quite, it wasn't. We were very settled. We could have had a very sane existence. We could have just studied the plants. But these people were into the experiment, which was going to take place on March 4th. I just want to get back into the story because it's going to take a long while, but this wasn't like this. It wasn't like your trips in the jungle. It was just, we were guided there, you know. They carried a lot of our stuff so we could have, you know, our typewriters, except we were typewriters. And it was just, it was on the surface, a scientific expedition, and it was run by...
Who funded it?
Huh?
Who funded it?
We funded ourselves.
Well, you mean you bought all that kind of stuff?
Well, we bought a typewriter for $25.
I mean, and somebody to carry it and all that kind of stuff?
We paid something like 300 pesos for them each to guide us and carry us. Well, there were 6 people. 4 people. 6 people when we started out. It was not money, not gringos. You know, we had a lot of equipment, but I mean, it was a big hammock. Everybody had a big hammock. And, we brought 20 pounds of granola and 10 pounds of powdered milk. It didn't last long, but we brought it.
And the people gave a lot of food, too.
Sure, they turn in food out there, you know. So everything for us was very poshy, and we weren't like immediately threatened by physical harm in the jungle. However, you know, Dennis began to deteriorate. He was first he lost his glasses. He sounds like me. First he lost his glasses. And then I'm walking across the field and we find it. And that was actually after all that stuff happened after the But
the jungle was too. I mean, you go washing in the wood and part of your clothes are deteriorating just from, I don't know, maybe the alkalis in the water. And then you go out and you get some more of this clay, that red clay acid. And that starts to heat your clothes. I remember we went in with 7 people. I got to come out with a backpack, a pair of short pants, a string of beads, and a shirt. Everything else just got anyway. I'll have to share it again. But Michael does.
No, I got the exact opposite.
You got more things.
Well, yeah, I did. I came back with a couple more things. We cook everything up really well. Because we're staying in nice houses, you know, we didn't have to take a lot of food.
The story's got more intense. You're headed for South Africa. You're ended up in Tibet.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to go see that person in the morning also. And I want you to give me an approximate idea of how much time we're going to be in on this one. Because I'm getting sort of, my energy's lowering.
I could continue it in the jungle.
Well, I would be into it.
Well, let's see, I don't know.
But a lot of other people might not.
Just tell them up to May 4th.
There's not that much more.
March 4th.
The final deterioration of Dennis. Okay, he has the experiment, right? And the experiment entails arrangement of the I Ching, and I think the primal arrangement. It's a little part of the book. And he has maybe another one, the inner world arrangement. So he's got 2 things. In the center of one, he's got a mushroom that is metabolizing. How do you say that?
Metabolizing?
A metabolizing mushroom.
How's that? What is it doing?
He just brought in the mushroom with the cow pottage.
Oh, I see.
And it was sitting in the center of this thing, right? And in the other center, maybe it was the inner world, I don't know. I wasn't there because he didn't tell me the mechanics of it. He's roughly showed me what he was going to do, but didn't explain enough. He put the cocoon hanging in a little Butoto basket.
It was a cocoon by the time?
Well, it wasn't a cocoon, it was a strange metabolizing powder-like shape hanging by the string in the basket.
The same one that you saw?
Yeah, the one he took from my window.
Was it alive still?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
He knew how to handle it. He took it off very carefully.
Yes.
It's just stuck to the wood.
All right, so go on. Let me know how.
And
What was the
drank ayahuasca.
What was the hypothesis for this experiment?
The hypothesis was going to be that by saturating the brain and the nervous system and the whole body with psilocybin, which is a member of the indole ring, that doing this, you would, by adding DMT and harmaline and harmine. Now catch those names. Harmine and harmaline, the active ingredients of ayahuasca. to me, it is very harmonic and a harmonious group of active chemicals for a very harmonic experience. There's too many coincidences going on. And tryptamine is too trippy to be called tryptamine because somebody accidentally called it funny name. These are the other coincidences that you can associate with this. Anyway, at the time of the in addition to the psilocybin-soaked system with ayahuasca and DMT, what would happen would be all the psilocybin would convert with all the tryptophan, which is a natural. Help me out. What's brain chemical? What's tryptophan?
I think it's an intermediate.
It's an intermediate, but it's also a nutritive element, which is a product of. It's
Let me write down, find out.
Tryptophan.
Tryptophan. I'll find
What
out.
is it? Tryptophan.
So go on.
It would change the tryptophan and the psilocybin into DMT, and at this point, the trained mouth, I guess, or the mouth that knows how to do it, or the mouth that can't help but do it.
Speaks unspeakable.
And the sound comes out in the form of blue goo, which is actually DMT, and which has the power to fill out ideas and manifest whatever ideas you have. So this is the philosopher's stone. So this is the climax of the story.
Oh.
Something like that.
Okay. So it happened.
He called it
Okay.
touch. There was only one minor case. The
All right.
next day,
It's too just dealing with energy.
it's March 5th.
So
Yeah, the next day's one.
there's 1 o'clock missing.
Okay, go on.
The March 5th, and Terence is over my hammock, and he says, get dressed, bring your hammocks. It was a total success. And he's he's almost morose for being, having totally succeeded, right? So,
You have to say what happened to him, his changes.
well, he turned blue. He turned really bluish, and his hair turned blonde.
But he reached crystal consciousness.
And what happened?
I don't know, it's just weird. He wasn't the same. His face had just got really gone. And he had always been rather intense, but this was a physical change that startled us a bit. So we addressed it.
The next day.
We followed him.
He used to have dark hair and
He
he
used
went
to have
blonde.
dark reddish brown.
Overnight.
Yeah.
He did. Overnight he went blonde.
I'm not sure, it seemed that way. I couldn't swear to it. I would not be surprised now if he did not. I saw him a couple years later and his hair was back to normal. Maybe it was I hallucinated. I don't know. He looked weird. And I can believe he was. He took that stuff, psychotrist stuff. He took all the stuff, man. He took the leaves. He took ayahuasca. And he took the psychotrifoliate. And he was stoned for at least a week or 10 days on mushrooms. So,
Tell the theory about the DNA.
okay, this is the crux of the problem, or the crux of the whole secret. This is essential part of the secret, is that harmine is one of the few drugs that does not fit onto the indole ring. All of our favorite drugs are represented. Mescaline, and let's see what other ones. LSD, and psilocybin. Terence really never did look, I never could say like him. He talked about such weird things that
Never check him up like simple.
And he says that at the time of the injunction of the DMT, at the time that all the psilocybin and the tryptophan, which is in the body, it's a brain nutritive. It's a basic component of nutrition. Tryptophan is in all starchy foods you eat, I think. As that turns into DMT, the harmine molecules fly up and down all your chromosomes.
Oh, yes?
Like butterflies.
Like butterflies, producing perhaps an unimaginable sound.
Wasn't there something about a mutation too? The mutation of the race?
I don't know. I guess you've taken ayahuasca for sure, haven't you? And Bruce has, and I have, and Juan has, and Scott has.
No, I never have.
See, so you can't. We know that there is something flying up and down your chromosomes.
Is that true, Bruce? Yeah. Grizzly is a great shape.
Ask me about a strange sound. Did you hear a strange sound? I don't know, probably not.
I heard one today. I felt the flutter.
I started talking about this the other night. I don't remember exactly where, and I had
Will, have you taken ayahuasca?
wings at the back of my brain, just like.
Oh, I felt that my back. I felt like wings were growing.
So what happened to the store?
So, I don't know, Dennis just went mad.
Dennis went mad?
Yeah, he never slept, he never ate. He says,
wow, that happened to a friend of mine.
Okay, wait, I want to hear more.
There's something I read last night. And what was that? I gave him beans and rice, and I thought he was going to eat it, and he takes one spoonful and then he sets it down, and then he says, and another thing, if we manage to get out of the galaxy, then, blah. He's talking in a genius way. It was like a cross between James Joyce and I don't know, he's drawing these images which are so clever. I couldn't write it down and I could never reproduce it. I think Sarah, in the subsequent stage of his madness, was able to capture a lot of it. She says her journal was incredible and she would loan it to me at any time. I haven't contacted her.
That's all right. Where is she?
I don't know. That's why I haven't gotten it.
Oh, that's right.
I'll find her.
Okay.
At the right time. But, what happened was he just was still speaking English and stuff when I saw him. And but he was doing things like around the night of the full moon, he went up to the machine and he began ringing the bell.
Oh, right. That's the guy. Oh, him! Is that the one that you're talking about that ran around nude in the square?
No.
Oh.
I didn't, you're talking about the guy that killed the colonel's chicken.
Another ayahuasca?
Good karma.
Yeah, I'm asking good karma, quote unquote. It wasn't so good after you got number the karma.
That's Thomas.
Was that Thomas?
Was that Thomas? Was that him? What did he do?
But that's people using their sediment.
Yeah, he lost
That ain't
it.
people,
What did he do?
Well, yeah, Dennis didn't do anything really. He did nothing obscene, but he would just go up to these straight nuns and just rave to them like he did to us. And purely in English, and just go on and on and on. And all the nuns were beginning to say, your friend is, they wouldn't say it in Spanish, they just threw it out this way. And I said, yeah, he's supposed to be always esperano, no? And he's a little better today than he was yesterday. And finally, Terence is just saying, Dennis, get back in your hammock. You have to conserve your energy for the final condensation. We had this. It was so intense, Terence, I was walking across the field with Terence and Sarah, and we were walking across the field in this line, not saying a word, just like little soldiers, The cows are all looking at us. And we get into the thing, we put up our hammocks, and we all get undressed, and he says, okay, we're going to initiate you. And what we did was, we didn't actually produce the Philosopher's Stone, but we produced a mantra.
What?
A mantra.
You did.
No, they did.
They did.
I guess he did. It's a mantra, which all you had to do was close your eyes and think the mantra. Now, Terence first wrote this mantra out, and he wrote Sanskrit, So he wrote it out.
Just
mantra,
regularly
and
he wrote Sanskrit?
No, he wrote it out in Sanskrit. He wrote McKenna. And he wrote it in Sanskrit.
That's his last name.
That's what happened. You don't have to say the mantra. You can just close your eyes and say, close your eyes and repeat to yourself, Dennis, what is it? And any question you have, Dennis would give you the answer.
fantastic.
I know, it was a great idea.
I bet it worked, you just didn't hear me.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Well, tell me where is he?
He's in Colorado. We went back to school to study ethnobotany. He wrote me a letter after this incredible situation, and he wrote me a letter and addressed to Michael Lamski, Lamski, which is a pretty good name. And he said, gee, I hear it was weird in La Chorrera. I don't remember a thing. I just remember being in Bogota and then coming back to Colorado. Everything's fine. I would appreciate if you'd write and tell me all about it.
Is that right? What's his name? Dennis what?
Well, what is the...
McKenna, yeah. Is that the guy? Terence McKenna. Oh, Dennis McKenna. I didn't realize it.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Right.
Well, I don't think he was ever hospitalized. That's one thing.
They didn't have to do that too.
We were pumping Valiums in him after he really got crazy. And we finally went to sleep. Well, no, Sarah's father was a good doctor. She didn't give
It's all right. Go on. So what's that?
It was me that pumped up for Valiums, and when I was freaking out on acid, that's another story. What happened?
So you were giving him Valiums, and what happened when you gave Valiums?
Sleep, and he disappears again. We had to look all over the place.
He just hit it up.
Yeah, he just climbed out of the window.
That's what Reggie did. Had a chaser and canoes, a couple times, save her life.
Yeah, well, see, you were in a much more precarious scene living on the island.
People do interesting things.
She was probably just wanting to get off the island.
Yeah, you flip out there.
Yeah, a lot of people do. The Padre came very shortly thereafter.
I flipped in the regular United States, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Instead of juggling
that might stop you from hurting yourself.
Yeah, in the jungle there is a lot of danger, like if you can't swim, you can't take away left turn. All these things. That's why we're worried when that disappears, and he is really going bananas.
Of course,
the Padre comes and he says, listen, your friend is very sick. He has jungle madness. They have a name for it. No, it's not unusual. He said, your friend has jungle madness. It's due to a vitamin B deficiency. He said, there's a plane coming tomorrow. Can you get $300 together to hire it to Leticia? And we'll contract it. The plane was just luckily coming in that day. And the next day, when that came, we said, yeah, we can get the $300 together. And when that happened, I guess Cooley put up half and Sarah put up half.
Where was Sia through all this?
He had let it back, right? He's smart. And 4th of July, and 4th of March, excuse me. And after that,
How long of a period of time is this?
It did not take long. Trying to see when we got right and defeat them over. It took a very short time.
Were you down there about 9 months or so?
No, 9 months. We weren't down there for 9 weeks. It was fast acting. San Rafael, February 15th.
It's my birthday. His birthday too. Your birthday too.
That was when we arrived in Ellen Conto. San Rafael, March 17th. So something happened on March 15th. Sometimes right in the day it happens. That's when we did it. Then we did the week walk. We must have gotten to La Chorrera around the 20th or something.
Yeah, we went right up to the Indian Territory. We just took ourselves and canoes, buckets.
Ellen Conto, we
did. I'd like to get back out there again.
Yeah, on February 21st, we were on the trail. See? So, I mean, it was just like 10 days or so until the experiment.
One guy asked me to do.
Well, that's a goodly lot of time.
Even though Mark was going to be.
Well, no, it isn't really.
10 days, intensity. Especially on drugs.
It was a long time. We were on the boat going down to Putumayo for another 5 days or so. And we stayed in San Rafael a few more days. So we We probably started around February 1st, and it took us.
How was the weather?
Beautiful. It was summertime.
Feb 1st from where? Down Punta Mayo?
Okay, so speculations have intensified as we draw nearer to the abode. This could be up to La Chorrera, something, the sequence of La Chorrera at 45 seconds, 0 degrees, 45 seconds south of the equator. 4 and 5 makes 9, Aquarius.
What's that?
Well, I just added the numbers together. It was 45 degrees south at 4 and 5 makes 9, and then it was 73 degrees east, and that makes 10.
There it is. 9 and 10.
That's Aquarius, huh?
Sounds like it to me. 9, 10 Aquarius.
I don't know. You know, he went crazy when he came back. He gave up the English language and just howled for, I don't know.
Is that
I
right?
had to keep him in a hotel room and watch him 12 hours.
Who did?
Kumi and Terence and Mike Tizlikis' hotel.
Gee, we're nice friends that keep after him, like keep
Sure,
it
they had
together.
to watch him. His legs were covered from bottom up to here with just staph from scratching bites. Almost one solid thing. When he was wrapped up, he almost looked like a mummy. You know, Sarah was great. We bathed him and put dressings on all his bandages. He had bandages all over the place. Because all he did was just sit there.
How long was he like
raise,
that?
scratch. Right after the experiment, it all started getting much, much worse.
How long?
He was
A couple of weeks.
let me see. When we left, I don't remember when we left.
Well.
That's dangerous if it gets in the blood.
That's where it always goes. It's not if it gets in the blood, it always goes down.
It's already there.
It's dangerous, you know. And the blood gets to the crap and takes it there.
Well, it starts getting to your lungs.
Fourth day in La Chorrera was
Fair,
February
glad
25th.
tidings.
So we were there quite a while actually. We got there February 21st.
February 21st.
That's March 4th.
So,
I saw an 800-page book this guy McKenna wrote. I told you about it, called Shaman.
is this the same person?
Yeah. I saw the book about 2 years after this time.
Oh, yes?
In London, the manuscript.
Yes?
It was called Shamanistic Investigations.
Huh.
And I don't know if it's ever been published.
Did you? Oh, really? And what'd you think of it?
I just saw it one afternoon.
You didn't read it?
I looked at it.
That'd be speed reading.
Well, I mean, well, anybody that...
Very bad. It's very complicated. I think he found some cyclical connection to the I Ching or something.
Oh, sounds neat.
We flew out of there. They flew out of there. Well,
So it's March 21st to March 12th. I mean, February 21st to March 12th. Is that
I
right?
think so. My journal just ends.
Okay.
Let me see what it is.
I tried that quite
What is the story about when you go to the bathroom if one would like a candle? Is that the story? Or is there one in there, do you know?
That's why I looked at Dr. Jones.
I'll wait.
Because they all know why not.
Maybe it's not a candle.
I was saying maybe there's
There's a
not a
candle in
candle.
that room. I think can help you.
Rhonda? She in the room?
It's a drag when you can't get all you have to do is put it
Well, so what are we going to reconvene in the jungle? Is that what we're going to do?
No, this guy's just about done. He raised in some language other than Spanish.
Okay, well, yeah.
Other than English. He howled and tried to get out of the plane. He was radiant.
Radiant.
Sarah said he got healthier. I mean, his sores got better, but his mind just ran down. And she said when he came back down a little bit, he began to speak just intensely beautiful things. She said the only thing I could say is he reminds me of Christ. That's what she told me. He said he was pretty horny, and he doesn't remember any of that at all. And he would just burst out of the hotel room with a sheet wrapped around him, and he had lost 40 pounds and he was skinny. when I knew him. Wow. He was maybe 6'2" tall and maybe weighed 160. He lost
16?
6 foot.
Yeah, 2 and weighed how much?
160. And then he lost 40 pounds and they went down to 20.
Oh my goodness. That's skinny, fellas.
But he was back together. It was weird. Harvey was in, like, Harvey just got done Leticia when they landed. No, the story was really neat, and I did skip a rather important part when we went to see the England. I'm sure it is. That's what happened to us.
What's your diet? Is that? Let's say.
Is there a candle? I need a candle to find things in the kitchen.
Good night, everybody.
Are you going to stay on computer?
Right?
No. Are you going to go to Well, I'm going to go. I don't think tomorrow.
Okay, so yes?
Yeah, tomorrow is one.
Bye-bye.
Did we?
Nico, you talking?
Delightful.
Yeah, I'll see you later. Thank you.
Well, okay, stay up here tomorrow, and then we'll go on weekend.
You want to know?
I'm going to come out and see you. Oh, God.
Going to Keto?
No, I'm not going to go to Keto. I'm going to go to E.P. Alex, but tomorrow. But Terence described it to me about, he said, Dennis is totally broken through when you made the sound. And I said, I don't exactly understand what you want this. And he says, well, a lot of people don't see it, and it's best that they don't. But there's insect-like anthropologists studying this. And at the time of making the sound or hearing the sound, this seen or unseen guardian will, I think he said, operate on your mouth. So you can make the sound. Now, here's how Dennis.
I know
Here's
you
how
mean.
it happened to Dennis.
There are insect anthropologists studying the human race.
Yes, and it's about, I think he said 12 to 15 feet tall. Well, anyway, what happened to Dennis was he was just out there taking a piss, but of course it was after at least a week of mushrooms. And he was taking a piss, and a light came out of the ground, and it just began to rumble up from inside him, and he blared out the sound. And after that, Dennis was changed. He was just like Terence. Before, when he came down, he was in his they're both very tall and skinny. Maybe Dennis is taller, and he just looked down at me, you know, with this bluish haze around his face, and his eyes were so wide open, like this, looking right into me, saying, Michael, I know you'll make the sound, but will Sarah make the sound?